J. Garrick, The Flash, issue 4. Jeremy Adams writing with Diego Ortega on the art. So this is delving into the backstory of Jay. Well, they're investigating the scientist, of course.
Yep.
And when they end up at Star Labs and talking to the current boss of Star Labs, it turns out that the scientist, whose name I'm blanking on right now,
Professor Hughes.
Thank you, Professor Hughes, is actually the silent partner who co-founded Star Labs. And they've got a journal, and then Jay reads the journal in front of Judy, and then that's most of the issues, like us seeing what's in this journal. It's the backstory of this guy. And he was a scientist who saw Alan Scott, the Golden Age Green Lantern, on TV, and decided that he thought everyone should be able to have powers and be special. And that's what he started working on. He started working on experimenting on animals, trying to unlock powers and make people better, immortal, whatever it may be.
Full-on mad scientist.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And he realized that he would need like a human test subject because the animals aren't working. So he started looking at different students at the Keystone University, and apparently had a couple of candidates first that he turned down. But then he found Jay, who wanted to be great, saw himself as potentially being great, but wasn't quite achieving it, right? And picked him as a lab assistant, and we get this whole backstory where the professor was like annoyed that he was chatting up girls. He thought that was distracting him from his work. But basically, the accident that gave Jay his powers wasn't an accident at all. It was planned by the scientist. He was intentionally dousing him in all these chemicals to see if it would do something to him. So I like that because it made the whole thing, like, you know, there's a lot of coincidence in the creation of the Flashes with the lightning strikes and whatnot.
Yeah, that doesn't say it's Jeremy Adams tying Jay into the Flash mythos and lore more than ever before, right? Because up to this point, yeah, he's the first Flash, but it's kind of a namesake thing. He's not really tapping into the Speed Force, right? He doesn't deal with time travel. All of these touchstones that I think make the Flash the Flash. And in the course of this issue, he you know, the lab experiment was planned by a villain to reveal Jay's own greatness, right? That's Zoom. You know, so he's almost cherry picking from these stories that Jay Garrick inadvertently inspired in order to tie that into Jay. So again, it's a very Flash thing to do, and I think it works on multiple levels.
Very thematically, it is doing all those things. I like it because it takes away a lot of the coincidence, and I know that, you know, the modern Flashes, like there's indications that the Speed Force was choosing them. It wasn't just a random lightning strike and all the usual, you know. I know there's been little flourishes added on to those things, but
and here for Jay, it is his metagene, right? Is the professor figures out like this wouldn't have just worked on anybody. He happened to get the right guy.
Well, yeah, this isn't in the moment itself. This is after the accident, quote unquote. Jay, it turns out, has super speed. He tries this in multiple other patients and it never works. And it's much, much later, I think it's the 1960s, before he's realized, no, what happened is he tapped into the metagene that Jay already had. It won't just work on anyone. And then he's determined to try and duplicate the metagene at that point. In fact,
it's his own obsession. It ends up becoming almost like a Lovecraft story where this man's obsession leads him into darkness that he cannot comprehend.
He's so secretive about it that he kills the doctor who discovers Jay's got special abilities after, you know, he's in hospital from the accident. You know, this doctor's like, hey, this stuff that's in his body will let him run faster than anyone else. He'll probably speed up to bullets. And the scientist pulls out a gun and shoots the doctor in the head. Because no one can know about this discovery. So, yeah, it's super interesting. I enjoyed getting this pulpy history of this character in this. And it works as well because, of course, Jay doesn't remember this guy either, which is very interesting because he's so tied to his backstory. But we get this, him working on his stuff. He gets this benefactor who we keep in shadows. We don't know who that is, I don't think. But we see he builds the robot bear thing that we saw before. He sees Judy when she's already a teenager, and he realizes time travel's involved, and it's that realization that the metagene was passed down from Jay to his daughter, that it means that maybe he could separate it and figure out a way to sort of make himself special, because that's ultimately what this is all about. He wants himself to become a god, and he wants to try and duplicate that no matter how, however he can. So he actually does the same experiment to Judy, right? Judy comes with Jay to work one day, and he set up a trap in the lab that'll trap her in the chemicals. And sure enough, the same thing happens to her. She gets the super speed. But it all goes a bit kablooey when one day she just disappears. And he even questions, like, wait, did my experiment do that to her? Was this like a side effect of me giving her all those chemicals? But then he realizes that Jay doesn't even seem to remember his daughter or even remember him. Like, the timeline's been messed up. And that's kind of where it wraps up, and we come back to present day. The cliffhanger is a bit random. The secretary at Star Labs, her arm turns into a minigun and says, "Oh, Professor Hughes called, says you're fired," and then shoots the boss for giving the journal to the Flashes. The ending's a bit random and just kind of silly pulp. But I actually really enjoyed the backstory of the scientist, and I especially like his really old school cult leader-looking outfit that he's wearing in the later stuff in the 60s period.
Hope that comes back around, in other stories later. Whoever this benefactor is, whatever he was setting up, why was he trying to bankroll this? How did this become Star Labs? It's almost kind of like, after seeing Oppenheimer, it's very reminiscent of Operation Paperclip, right? Where we were taking a bunch of foreign scientists and putting them in special projects, and that's how we end up on the moon, So I wonder almost if it was the government that was setting him up, right? Because we already know, if you know your JSA lore, right, they end up at one point being forced to unmask for, public safety, and they have to know who these masked men are. And that's kind of the whole point of the book, The Golden Age, is what if they did and what if they didn't? So,
I mean, honestly, my first instinct with this shadowy benefactor who's paying thingy to try and continue his experiments. Yeah. My first instinct was time travel. This is someone from the future. But I could just be making a leap there. There was just something about it. I was like, oh, we're going to recognize who this is if we ever see them.
Yeah, I feel like there's a reason that they shadowed the face, to make it this thing. But yeah, just there's some of these real ties stuff that I feel like Adams is working through. And, I was worried that once it was revealed to be Professor Hughes and it was going to be this, he was always a villain for Jay Garrick and one of those kind of retcons. But the way that it worked and making it a quintessential Flash, kind of taking Jay down that road, I ended up, starting off from a negative place and really came around to it. So,
I think for me, Jay Garrick's backstory is so vague, and I've never really read there's not a Jay Garrick year one, right, or anything like that, and it's not an origin that everyone knows or anything like that. So I feel like there's a lot more room for me personally to sort of reshape what his backstory is. So I didn't have a problem with any of this. Whereas if you try and do it with Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, I'll just be rolling my eyes because I'm like, we know their backstory. It's been well explored. We know what the fundamentals of it are. This is more of a blank canvas in a lot of ways. Obviously, there is a backstory that was there, but the backstories in Golden Age comics were, a couple of pages at best.
Yeah, and the fact that his origin is something called hard water vapors. It's all kind of this.
Matt,
these were thrown together.
Matt, last I checked, hard water was ice, but maybe I'm.
Yeah, that's what. Well, actually, hard water is mineralized water, and it causes chaos out here in our pipes. My brother has to deal with it a lot as a plumber, so. That was, I think they were just trying to find something scientific-y back in the 30s. We'll call it hard water, and it's these minerals that he inhaled that gave him his powers, and I'm wondering how many kids in the day were dissolving stuff to try to replicate the Flash's powers, So.
I don't know. I have no idea. But
but it's again them Adam's tying this directly to like Flash stuff and making it more feel like he's tied into the Flash family. Like you could be right. This could be somebody
but I want to be clear
future.
though. I want to be clear though, Matt. Only thematically. There's nothing plot point here wise that actually ties him to any of those characters.
Right. Yet. Right. Because what if that is somebody from the future that we know, that came to bankroll this to, who knows? But yeah, just the fact that the themes are all there, and Jay doesn't feel like such an island amongst the Flash family. Like I know that he raised Bart, right? There was that whole thing. That's how they tied Impulse and the families and stuff together. But him not being an island anymore thematically, I think is a nice step.
Yeah, it doesn't have to become too similar to the others, though. Part of the strength of the character is that he can be different. He can feel different to the other ones that are a lot more samey. One of my favorite things about this issue is actually just how much the scientist kind of hates him and hates everyone else and just wants to do his work. He says when he's recruiting people, "Oh, Jay's not that attractive, and that means he won't be as distracted by girls." So then later on, when he is chatting up a girl at some point, I don't know if that's meant to be his wife,
Joan, right?
At the time, you see, there's during the montage, there's that page where it's the scientist's face, and there's all these panels around it, and it's like the time passing for 20 years, and you see in that 20 years he does get married to Joan, but I don't know if that's who he was chatting up at college, but. Just the scientist, just contempt for him, he's not focused on the work, and it's almost like a stupid thing that he cares because you're about to use him as a human test subject, he might die anyway. Why do you care if he's not committed?
Because it's projection. This man has nothing else going on for him either, so he doesn't want anything else going on for anyone else.
Yeah,
yeah. So he wants them to be mundane, and the fact that Jay was kind of a mediocre football player that he talks up, and that's how he gets him as a lab assistant. But Jay Garrick was still somebody that people liked. He kind of is. I almost put him as the heart of the JSA. He kind of is the one that ties them all together. So just the idea that he didn't even have Jay picked outright, that's probably frustrating him even more. But yeah, this is Jeremy Adams on the Flash is still it's one of these things that some writers just kind of get the property, and he's just showing between this and his Flash with Wally run. I'm gonna be sad when this one's over because then I won't have any more Jeremy Adams on the Flash. I'll just have him on Green Lantern.
Yeah, all right. What are you giving Flash?
I'm gonna give this an 8.
I think I'll go with a 7.5 on this. That's enjoyable. I like the backstory. I like fleshing it out a little bit, and the pulpy scientist villain is fun. I liked it from his perspective and all of his sort of very untrustworthy kind of viewpoints on who Jay is. It's kind of interesting to get it from that angle.